Okay, let's just minimize that. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Let's make sure this is working. All right, we're going to admit everyone because we are going to be going live on the old Zoom. And so you are going to be joining me here live. This should be fun. Let's admit everyone. Get everyone coming on in and rolling in today. That'll be good. I can dial some volume up. I'm sure I can hear everyone. Hello everyone, hope you guys are all doing well. So as you can see today, right now, I've got a couple of things. It's just me. Caroline, unfortunately, is currently in hospital. She's unable to join us at the present time. She told me that she's hoping to have been out about a couple of hours ago, but unfortunately she is, well, she's still there. So hopefully she's all right because, of course, tomorrow we've got a very busy weekend. Caroline and I are off to Parameet for the weekend, and we're going to be doing a couple of talks there, but for the present time, unfortunately, she is a bit away. And if you hadn't noticed, there's something behind me you might have seen. It says ASSAP and Seriously Strange. So this came through the post today. So we are going, of course, we've got Seriously Strange conference coming up, and I'm trying to make it look like a conference. So my intention is to make it look as big and as bold and as colourful as possible, and to make it look like there's something important going on. So actually, inspired by the football, inspired by the World Cup, every band, every football team appears to have one of these banners behind them. And I have the frame for it. So I'll be taking this with me off to the Seriously Strange conference in August. The idea is that everyone can take pictures, take selfies, take videos with it. You could look in front of it, pose, and all that kind of, fun celebration stuff. So if you're a fan of the old TikTok and reels and stuff like that, you can take a picture and see those images. That should be a bit of fun. So, other things I need to let you guys know about. So, as I says, Caroline and I are off to Parameet this weekend. So I'm going to be there from tomorrow. Caroline, I guess, will be there from, if she gets out of hospital. So I guess she's got some time to travel from the old Somerset. We are giving a talk on Sunday. I'm going to be covering phenomenal Nottinghamshire. And I believe Caroline is going to be covering lithobolia. It's actually... I'm stepping in today, I'm stepping in next week, for Dave Holdridge. I'm going to be doing a talk in the time slot that he was going to do, and one of the topics he wanted to discuss was lithobolia. So Caroline was inspired by this, and she's going to be giving a talk on that at Parameet, which I don't know too much about, but I understand it's about the throwing of objects and stones and stuff like that onto to people and around people. I don't know too much about it, so I've literally got to either Google the term or listen to Caroline's talk. So that's going to be me. That's in terms of ASSAP news. Not so much going on. A bit quiet behind the scenes. But on that note, if you've been over to the ASSAP website, and I highly recommend you do. In fact, I'm going to take you over there right now so you can have a look at what's going on that particular website, because I think a lot of people don't know what I've been doing behind the scenes. Let's see if I can share my screen. So, hopefully you guys can see this now. This is the current new ASSAP website. Well, updated ASSAP website as such. Hopefully you guys can see this okay. I'm worried that you guys can't. So we've got a big new, bold, colourful screen. I have been hard at work. The website for a long time has bothered me, because I've never really got into sorting it out really. It uses Expression Engine. It's very different to the likes of WordPress and so on. And I decided to finally get into the back end of it and make it look like a pretty modern and useful website. But one thing that I've done, as I've spoken about recently, is we've added the members login, so you can now log in at the top of the page. And here we have our members home effectively. This is hoping to basically to become a hub of our users here. So we have our webinars here, we have our catalogue of what we've got coming up, our webinar catalogue of all of our talks that we've had. So I'm trying to keep this up to date as possible. We have our media channels where you can find us on YouTube and so on. That needs some graphics. We can get that up and running pretty soon. But the idea is that you can see the Seriously Strange catalogue, the Anomaly catalogue going back many, many issues. We also have the ASSAP News catalogue as well. Now, I have an update on that. So if you remember last week, we were talking with Maurice Townsend and Alan Cleaver. We were missing issues number 11 to issue 91. So Maurice Townsend actually has issue 11 to issue 50, and he's in the process of sending me them over. So actually, we're going to get them online as soon as we can, so you can dive into the back end of those excellent ASSAP archives, of which there is literally hundreds and hundreds of issues of back content that you guys can get your research claws in. And also, we have the investigators' bulletins as well that Bill has been looking over as well from 2005 to 2009. So the website, I really wanted to make it a hub. It's something we've wanted to do for a little while, and no one really knew how to go about doing it. But thankfully, I believe we are in a place where it appears to be working sort of in the way we want it, and I'll get some more updates coming soon. So if you go to the ASSAP website, log in, you'll get access straight to your members hub, and we're going to be expanding that, of course, over the coming months. So let's just close that up, and we'll talk about what we got going on tonight. Now, where is the old Zoom at the bottom of my screen? Here we go, wrong page, wrong screen. There we go. Where are we looking? Where is Zoom for here? So hopefully I'm not going to bore you too much. So today, let's just stop sharing that screen. And I will now switch over to a video file. So the reason we're going to be playing a video file today is we actually recorded this talk with Paul Bestall a couple of months ago. Carol and I, we managed to get this recording done, particularly for this time slot where we knew we were going to have a number of poltergeist cases that over the course of 8 weeks, I think 6 of them were going to be poltergeist related. So we recorded this ahead of time for this particular period, and we never announced it as a poltergeist period of time, but that's what this one is. But actually, it's a bit more than that. It really taps into things like beyond poltergeists, into things like human combustion. Of course, the most famous cases around poltergeist cases, Enfield and so on, and also some more personal cases too. I had an opportunity to watch it back today. Paul Bestall, I've actually been on the phone to him literally 10 minutes ago before you guys joined in, and he actually is going to be joining us in the chat very, very soon. He currently he's away at work, but he's going to be here by the time that the presentation finishes in the video, so he's going to join us about 8 o'clock, and you guys can then throw your questions at him when he comes around. So I think most people have come on board. Again, I apologise for Caroline. I'm sure she's going to be here as soon as. I think did say she was going to try and join the chat, but apparently she hadn't seen a doctor at the time that I had spoke to her. So I guess she's gone through the triage process and so on. So anyway, enough of me chattering while everyone's joining the live feed here. Let's get on and watch today's talk together. This is going to be Paul Bestall, and I'll introduce the talk as it comes on. Let's make sure I have this file lined up ready, and I hope you guys get to watch and enjoy this. So what we're going to do, we'll play this recording. It's about 45 minutes, and then Caroline and I go into a chat with him, and then basically when that kind of chat wanes off a little bit, we will then join Paul live here in our studio. Hide view.
Good evening, everybody. This evening we have the wonderful Paul Bestall. He is the host of Mysteries and Monsters podcast and co-host of the Anglo-Canadian podcast, The Ghost Guys.
Thank you. I'm delighted to join you. It's been a long time coming, so thank you for extending the invitation to join you at last.
Have you ever spoke at an ASSAP webinar or an event before?
No, this is my debut for yourselves.
Ooh. That time. I'm going to make it lighthearted here. No, actually, thank you very much for joining. It's been an honour to actually have you come here, because obviously I've admired your work through Mysteries and Monsters for quite some time, actually. So it says that, and I've met you through Paranormal, I've met you at various shows, and we've always been in passing with each other, and we've never actually had a sit down. Hey, how you doing? It's been good fun.
Absolutely. I'm still quite humbled when people like yourselves know who I am. So even though I've been doing this for 7 years, like when Caroline came over and said hello, because I know lots of people, but I don't necessarily think that they know me. So it was quite humbling when anybody
I
said
know.
hello.
I've been watching.
And you still invited me on.
I did.
Absolutely.
I did. I think you've got a wonderful way of explaining, and the way that you look at things. It's kind of like the ASSAP thought process that goes through it. You know, there's none of these big fantasies that can't be explained with you, is there? So this is why I like what you do. So quite grounded in your reasoning.
Well, I think despite my personal experiences, because my stepfather was a doctor of chemistry and my mother's side were very supernatural and spiritual, I like to think I am very much in the middle of skepticism and believer, because I think that's the only way, because for me either side is the same, is the opposite side of the same coin, because it's ingrained, it becomes dogmatic, and I get as frustrated with explanations as I do with belief, that it's just pulling things, well, that's clearly the ghost of some poor girl who was murdered 300 years ago. Is it? Why is that? So it's those kinds of things, and I like to be able to keep things, like you say, less fantastical, because I think there's a lot of rational reasonings for what's going on. I just don't think we've got a handle on what that is yet.
No,
exactly.
I think people
Chris and I have this repeat thing that we keep saying, that we don't know what it is that we're dealing with at the moment. So everybody's synopsis of what it is that they visualize, what it is that they experience, witness, etc., is our own personal experience and thought process. You can throw some science into it if you have regular patterns that repeat, obviously. So that's the only way that you can put a scientific slant on it, is just by the repeat behavior of certain tropes within the paranormal. So, but yes, I've seen stuff that you've done, and your name has knocked around, and with the ASSAP link as well, because you are there, around that peripheral. That's why we approached you, and we're very, very grateful that you're here with us.
Okay.
To do this talk. And Poltergeist is one of my favourite subjects, so I am so looking forward to this.
I'm sure everyone is too as well. So thank you once again for joining us. So if you don't mind sharing your screen, then step up to the plate, as it were, and we're going to sit back and we'll hit the mute button here, and I'll let you have your presentation, share it as what you have, and we'll come back to you on the other side.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Yes, so hello, as my lovely introduction there from the host Caroline and Chris there. My name is Paul Bestall. I'm from Mysteries and Monsters, and today I'm going to be diving into some of my thoughts in regards to the poltergeist phenomena over the years. And as such, I'll try and indicate my understanding or what I think might be going on throughout this. So obviously, the history of poltergeist has probably been with us, for anybody who's interested in the particular subject, in the British Isles for quite a long time. One of the first cases I became aware of as a young person, primarily probably because it made me laugh a lot, was the Cock Lane ghost, and the strangely titled Scratching Fanny that was involved in this, which was obviously found to be one of the earliest examples of a well-crafted hoax throughout that particular period, which is one of those strange cases where it essentially seems to have been some kind of bullying and fraud going on, and the perpetrators were caught, and yet people started to feel very sorry for them and ended up raising lots of money for them. So the whole history of the poltergeist has been quite a strange one here in Britain, along with the infamous drummer of Tedworth. And so for me personally, how I look at this particular subject now is probably completely different to what I thought about it as a teenager, when I was beginning to embrace my fascination with this. As I'm sure people are aware, I grew up in a haunted house. My auntie had a poltergeist in her particular pub. So I've kind of had a personal understanding of the difference between a haunting and a poltergeist, because what was going on in the house I grew up in was extremely different to what was going on in my auntie's public house in Chester, which was some of the strangest things I've ever seen, from the old sort of wall telephone, the handle and line sort of levitating upwards like a snake and then just dropping to the floor. I mean, even at 11, I was looking for fishing wire and things. So clearly I had the skeptical nature as part of my sort of response to these kind of things, because I was just fascinated by it. And I just thought at first people were pulling my leg. But I think when you've seen that and there wasn't anything like that, it kind of changes your perception about what exactly is going on. And so from that aspect onwards, I suppose, and for many people of my particular vintage, being front and centre as the Daily Mirror covered the notorious Enfield haunting at the end of the 70s, it seems to have been part of my life forever. And so as Caroline referred to earlier, this has always been probably my favourite aspect of ghost lore or the paranormal in regard to the world of ghosts, because these are the cases, I think, there's such a radical difference in them. There are some tropes and cliches that can appear at times in these, but I think the more you look at them, the less similar some of them start to become. And I think because the theories in regards to what a poltergeist is, what causes it, seems to have become attached to these tropes in regards to why they happen, who they affect, how long they go on for. As with many people, I suspect at the beginning, I thought that, yes, these were perhaps disembodied, disincarnate spirits that for some reason had attached themselves to prepubescent teenagers of a variety of descriptions. But as I've read more and seen more and understood more about the world around me, I don't really have much faith in my original belief system in regards to that. And so one of the first people that really kind of set my mind off in regards to looking at other possible explanations was obviously some of the work that Nando Fodor did. Primarily the Thornton Heath case in Birmingham, I think in the 1930s, which was essentially explained by Fodor by the end of as a manifestation of sexual frustration or sexual trauma that the main victim in that particular case was. And as such, that wasn't a haunting. It was more of a manifestation of this person's trauma causing these problems in this particular property at the time. And that was my first sort of exposure to thinking about this phenomena outside of the parameters of it being a ghost or a spirit. And whilst I may not embrace everything that Fodor put forward in regards to more of a psychological explanation of what the poltergeist phenomenon was, it certainly lit the touch paper for me in regards to considering the possibilities that this may be more an internal manifestation, be it not necessarily psychological, but is it some kind of kinetic energy release? Is it some kind of chemical reaction? Is there something else going on that our knowledge of anatomy and the brain has yet to uncover the potential for these kind of things? Because throughout our lives, we have always come across people or read stories about certain individuals who almost seem allergic to the modern world. People who seem to have allergic reactions to Wi-Fi, or they can never wear a digital watch because it always breaks, or they touch things, electrical items, and they short circuit or implode or the like. So there is a situation out there where there are certain people who seem to be antagonistic towards electricity or the radio waves and numerous other things that are flying around us at every moment of the day, passing through us, around us, over us, whatever, at any given point. And so that's kind of been where I've more interested in looking at, rather than just sort of suggesting that all these are ghosts. I think that there's a variety of situations going on, which is leading us down to some kind of, as I say, chemical reaction or some kind of energetic release somehow. And so, along with obviously the incredible body of work that Harry Price put in regards to these particular subjects, for better or for worse, Price certainly dragged the paranormal into the modern entertainment sphere and made ghost hunting a sort of national pastime here. And whilst, once again, I don't agree with everything that Price did, and I know that there are certain cases where the showman side of him probably overrode any particular paranormal incidents, I think they're both vitally important people, because they seem to be coming from this particular subject from completely different points. But I think my personal interpretation of where we are now is somewhere in the middle of both of them. And I think one of the great aspects of looking back over the work of the last 150 years that the luminaries in this particular field, the work that the Society for Psychical Research have done, the Ghost Club, organisations such as yourself, the Centre for Fortean Zoology has even dived into these kinds of subjects, and other such organisations around the world. It's given me a real tapestry of arguments and explanations that I think, as we often find in the world of the Fortean, some people become absolutely transfixed with their explanation being the only one. And yet it becomes very apparent very quickly that you start banging into cases that don't fit those parameters, or that explanation simply doesn't work. It's very similarly to where you will have a certain case where people will say, oh, well, we can explain this bit. Well, that's fine. I can get that. And often when you've got a lot of chaos going on in a particular incident, which is primarily what tends to happen in poltergeist cases, I think sometimes the mundane gets elevated way above what it could be. Whereas a picture falling off a wall normally in your house, and you don't think you've got a ghost, it's the picture's falling off the wall. If your house is haunted and you've got an infestation, well, it's whatever you've got in there is throwing things off the wall all of a sudden. And so it allows us, I think, to be able to weave these various strands and theories together to kind of put us in a position, for me now, where I think this is leading me to what's going on here. And I suppose a prime example for me, and probably the case that really sort of gave birth to Mysteries and Monsters, is what I thought at the time was a completely forgotten case, which is obviously number 1 Byron Street in Runcorn, which was a haunting from the early 1950s, which involved the BBC, the SPR, the local church, and was a very unusual case, primarily because the version we know these days was not the version that was reported at the time. So a very brief synopsis of it is that this house was a whole family who were under the guardianship of the grandfather, who was a gentleman called Sam Jones. And so there was a very tumultuous family situation going on there. His daughter didn't live in the house. She lived in a separate property, but her children lived with her father, who also lived with another female relative and a couple of lodgers. And over the summer of 1952, strange things started happening, the usual bang, cracks, scratching in drawers. And the whole house became sort of a local tourist attraction. People were coming round, the BBC turned up, the local paper, the Runcorn Guardian, got involved. You had an early sort of paper war going on where the Runcorn Guardian was saying, hey, we've got the Poltergeist exclusive. The other Runcorn paper was saying it was a load of old bunkum because they weren't allowed in. So you had that kind of opposite straight away with that. But this case was is often called the John Gaunt case, who was the name of the grandson. But when you look at it, most of the incidents seem to be happening around the grandfather, which straight away would suggest, well, this isn't the standard poltergeist case then, because whilst the grandson John was 17 years old, obviously his grandfather and him, as they did in those post-war days, they shared a room, they shared a bed, so they slept together. So these incidents were happening in the room they were both in. But there were also incidents going on where the grandfather worked at a local farm, and there's a very famous incident where within a couple of weeks of the haunting starting at Byron House, as you can see here on the screen, Sam Jones worked at a local pig farm, and within a couple of weeks of that, 2 or 3 of the pigs began to get ill, and within 6 days, every single pig, I think there was 51 pigs on this farm, had all died. They were all examined by 5 veterinarians who came and checked them. The majority of the veterinarians said that these pigs had all been scared to death. They hadn't been poisoned. They hadn't been killed. They had been frightened to death. They all seemed to have enlarged hearts, as though they'd had some kind of heart trauma. So you'd got all this going on and strange sightings happening on the farm, whilst this was also going on at the house. And then you add to the situation that a lodger who was living there also died under mysterious circumstances at a notorious local mountain called Frog Hill, from which, when I checked recently, is still getting people who are falling off it and seriously injuring and even dying there. So quite why this place has still not got a fence on it or warning signs or people have stopped from climbing on it, I don't know, because obviously halfway through the Byron House haunting, the female lodger slid off the top of Frog Hill to her death. And so when you look at this case and you look at what people call it or how people recorded it, it's always put forward as it being the grandson's situation. But when I've gone through all the newspaper archives and looked at the original reports and what the SPR did and the police reports that are still in Runcorn, everything's around Sam. It's not around John. So straight away, you've got a case there. Well, yes, we've got a young man here, but we've also got most of the activity occurring around the grandfather instead. But also, one of the things that never seemed to get mentioned in this is that their father, John's dad, had died tragically several months earlier, which is quite hard to uncover exactly what happened. There is a sort of inclination in regards to the reporting that he may have taken his own life, but it's not very clear. So it's a bit murky. However, you've got all this happening in the year prior to the haunting happening. So there's a lot of family tension here. But once again, one particular individual came to spend the night there, claimed that he saw John throwing something. However, other witnesses caught Sam red-handed, the grandfather, banging a clock against a wall right at the very end. And so are we to suggest that both of them were faking it? Or once again, it's that kind of situation that just because somebody of a skeptical nature says, well, I saw this, that we have to accept that that's the truth, because for better or for worse, some people do tell lies, regardless of which side of the argument they're coming at this, but whether they're a believer or a skeptic or stuck in the middle, as many of us find ourselves to be. And so it was this particular case, when I discovered it 8 years ago, I became so fascinated with it that I had to go to Runcorn. I had to go to the site. I had to sneak around on the street in the afternoon, taking some pictures of the house, trying not to draw attention to myself, which was quite unusual at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, running around a strange street in Runcorn that I'd never been on in my life, and diving into the archives that were in Runcorn Library and the like. And so this case was the one that made me think, I think there's a lot more to this than just the usual tropes of it being teenagers with puberty running through them and they're all going a bit nuts. And so that was a fascinating case because straight away that goes against all the cliches that we're told about in regards to this. Because like I say, on my interpretation of the information, the timeline, the situations that were going on, this haunting seemed to surround the grandfather and not the children in the case. I mean, it was massive. It's one of those cases, I think, that until sort of Danny Robbins and the Uncanny team dragged the Battersea Poltergeist into the light of the modern era, there seems to be several cases of that ilk from the 1950s that have just dropped off, because I think they're in that sort of post-Harry Price era where nobody seemed to sort of grab these cases by the scruffs of the neck. And so Runcorn, for me, is a very interesting case because there's a lot going on in that one. Very, very similar to the infamous case the following decade in Rhondda Street in Swansea, which was famously dismissed. I remember reading an article at the time that the mother in the case, the lady who came home and discovered her house had been absolutely smashed to pieces, she was suffering from nerves or something of that ilk, which is just gone 60 years ago, because this happened in December 1965. And as you can see here, the South Wales Evening Post covered it. The photos of that particular property, often we will get cases where people will say, oh, well, it's clearly a hoax. Having grown up in a pit community, I would never have understood the reason for a housewife to absolutely smash her own house to pieces. I mean, there was such a mess in this particular incident that the police had to smash the door in to get back into the house after she'd run out with the baby, because obviously the thing that triggered it was that there was a large object thrown at the baby's cot and had smashed the cot to pieces, and luckily the baby was in the mother's arms at the time. But this was another case which was kind of dismissed as nerves, attention-seeking, hoaxing. But if you look at the original reports, and there are clips of some of these early interviews from the BBC at the time, and I believe that there was a couple of journalists from ITV also went down there in its infancy back in the 60s. There are numerous pictures and video of the house. It looks like a tornado has been through it. To suggest that a woman would do that whilst holding on to a baby, I mean, as you can see on the front of the newspaper on the left-hand side here of the image, that's what the kitchen is. And she's kind of sat in the middle with all the units have been ripped off the wall. She's got the cooker that's been thrown from one side of the kitchen to the other in front of a fridge. That's hard work for even a fairly strong rugby player to achieve, I think. Never mind a young housewife in her early 20s. And whilst we are aware of certain cases where adrenaline has kicked in and allowed people to have untapped levels of incredible strength in certain circumstances, such as people being able to lift cars off children or pull open doors that they didn't think they could do, or rescue people in certain situations, I find it hard to explain this particular case as a hoax. And once again, there's no teenagers here. They were 20. I think the wife was 24, the husband was 27, and the child was 6-7 months old. So straight away, well, that's not happening. And so you begin to think, well, hang on, well, that case doesn't fit either. And straight away, you've got two very well-known cases at that particular period in time, which should straight away do not fit the cliche teenager angst, working class family struggles. And it became apparent to me that there are certain cases that as I'll touch on without going on, because I don't want to bore anybody going on and on about Enfield, because I think there's not much anybody else can say about it at the time. But obviously, coming from Yorkshire, one of the most notorious cases for me growing up was the infamous 30 East Drive at Pontefract and the work that Colin Wilson did there. But also the profound effect it had in regards to Wilson, because he wasn't really a believer of the paranormal as such prior to Pontefract. And yet this case seems to have completely changed him and gone from not necessarily a non-believer, but he certainly seemed to embrace the poltergeist phenomenon incredibly. And regardless of the modern interpretation of the location and the allegations in regards to the venue and what goes on there these days, I think the original case in its essence in the late 60s, early 70s is one of those odd poltergeist cases where we've got a lot going on that seems to affect numerous members of the family, and not necessarily when the teenage children were there, because obviously it was a son and daughter who were there, who I think were 10 and 13 at the time, with the infamous daughter being dragged up the stairs and furniture being flung about or whatever. But you had the other incidents like the incredible dancing gloves, which is always one of the creepiest things I've ever read in regards to a poltergeist case, doing this weird dance over the door frame, where the mother and a friend were there. The daughter and the son were not even, I think they were at school. The jug of milk being poured on somebody's head who said it was all nonsense. Children weren't in the house there. Now, that's not to say that these things can't happen if the child isn't there, in regards to the notion that the child is the fulcrum of the haunting. But once again, Pontefract started to show that incidents would happen regardless of who was there. It wasn't worse and it wasn't better if the children were there. Things just happened. And it continued to happen until, as with quite a lot of poltergeist cases, it essentially burns itself out, runs out of juice. And it was another case that's made me start to think that, once again, I suppose if you've got a bias that leads you into believing that everything is connected with teenagers and puberty, then you, whether you want to or not, you begin to kind of move away from the evidence that disproves that or weakens that particular explanation. Because, as I say, Swansea, Runcorn, Pontefract, only two of them have teenagers involved. Both of the teenage cases, things happened when the teenagers weren't there, and incidents were happening when someone else was there. So clearly, none of those three fit if you look at the actual evidence rather than the participants, which I think is the problem sometimes, that people look at the participants and not the actual events that were going on and who was there at the time. I suppose one of the biggest changes in my thinking, again, was learning about the work that these two gentlemen did, which I'm sure anybody who knows is obviously on the left-hand side here. You have the Dr. Barry Taff, and on the right-hand side, you've got Dr. Kerry Gaynor, who sadly no longer works in parapsychology. He's an extremely successful anti-smoking psychologist now, with numerous celebrity clients, and has devoted the last 35 years of his psychology career to dealing with that, which I discovered by accident when I messaged him to ask him if he'd come on the show, because I'd already spoken to Dr. Taff and I always wanted to speak to Dr. Gaynor, but he said whilst he enjoyed that period of his life and he learnt a lot and left that particular field with more questions than answers, it's not something he wants to devote any time to. Make of that what you will. But obviously, Barry and Kerry were very famous for two notorious poltergeist cases that they both dealt with. Firstly, Doris Byther's, which is the case that the rather challenging film The Entity is based upon. Many a teenager would have been caught unawares by the content of that particular film, and it is an extremely challenging case with a few difficult situations to get your head around. Obviously, this is one of numerous photos that were taken at the time of these arcs of light that would fly around Doris, often when she claimed that she could sense that this malevolent spirit was entering the vicinity. And if anybody's read anything about the case, the film isn't that far away, apart from the end. The film isn't that far away from the actual incidents that happened. It's a fascinating case, but one that is very challenging to read. It's very challenging to hear what Doris claims to have gone through. And it's very challenging in regards to how the investigators viewed this particular case, because without delving into too much detail, as I say, if you don't know anything about it, I do recommend reading it, but be careful when and where you do. This whole sort of weird sexual dynamic that was inside this case that Barry and Kerry kind of identified, primarily, yes, they're parapsychologists, but they're also psychologists, that this was seen to be some kind of sexual energy explosion that was emitting out, and they weren't really sure what it's a very peculiar case. But once again, this carries on for a certain period of time and then drifts away. But this is probably one of the most it's an uncomfortable case, I have to say. It makes you want to take a shower and clean yourself off after you read through it all. But it was this kind of discussion, because I ended up interviewing Dr. Taff about 5 years ago now, primarily about this. And so this case and the other one that he was very involved in, which is this secondary infamous case, which is the San Pedro haunting of 1989, and this infamous picture of poor Jeff Wheatcroft here. What Dr. Taff said that he'd begun to realize was that a lot of people in the cases that he was investigating, there would be someone in the house, be it a parent, a child, or a relative, that had some form of epilepsy, which to him had basically connected the dots in that regard. And so for him, he believes that a lot of these poltergeist infestations, hauntings, situations or whatever are some kind of secondary reaction to epilepsy. Now, obviously there are a variety of levels in regards to epilepsy. It can be controlled by medication. Sometimes it can't be controlled at all. Some people have very minor forms of it. Some people have life-limiting versions of it. I'm sure most of us have met people with a variety of levels of epilepsy over the years. And obviously, once again, this is such a notorious photo in regards to the Jackie Hernandez San Pedro haunting. And once again, the weird aspect of this was that the investigators, after a while, came to the conclusion that this was a manifestation of anger in regards to Jackie, who was the fulcrum of this particular case, as the previous one, Doris Bythers. These are women in their 30s. Yes, they've got teenage children, but it was the mums, single mums as well, who were the totem for whatever was going on, it would seem. And in the San Pedro with the Jackie Hernandez, there was a feeling of attraction from Jackie to Jeff. And one of the theories that came through to the Barry's team at the time was that Jeff was happily married and had no interest in getting to know Jackie anymore, shall we say. And once that became clear, obviously the incident that is being shown here where they went into the attic because numerous strange noises were being heard there. There was no light in there. And Jeff went up with another investigator behind him, heard a loud noise. Because there was no light, the other guy that followed him started taking pictures. This is the picture that he caught. Quite why you would take a risk of trying to hang yourself for an effect in a darkened attic in a house that you don't live in is clutching at straws for me. Now, I'm not suggesting that perhaps he got tangled up in it or whatever. However, it does seem very odd because it's a loose flex when you look at it on later images, because there's a very strangely made documentary that you can find on Prime about this, which was clearly made about 35 years ago and hasn't aged very well. But it's worth it for the actual footage of the house and the investigation at the time, if you can ignore the awful voiceover and tedious sort of ghost puns that are littered throughout it. And so, once again, we have a lady in her 30s who seems to be releasing some kind of pent-up sexual anger or whatever, in their opinion, along with this sort of history of epilepsy, because Jackie had slight epilepsy, as did Doris Byers. Now, once again, you may suggest that perhaps your most famous cases are linked with a particular ailment. Does that necessarily mean that occurs in everything else? And as unfortunately with everything, one of the questions that I began to wonder about was, well, is this one of those things where we've got a medical explanation for what's going on, but we have to look at the way we've done these investigations previously? And so for me, I like to look at things forensically in any aspect. So I would want to know, when were they born? What month were they born? What was their birth like? Do they have a history of ailments? Is there a family history of any chronic illnesses? Have they got an aversion to technology? Do other things break? What blood group are they? What's their white blood cell count? Anything that would give us more depth to this, because I think, for me now, I think we're far past the point of it just being pinned on teenagers. And the more cases like these that you look at, the more intriguing it becomes. And therefore, I find myself having more questions because, as with many people, my sort of case that I would always embrace and hold dear to me and say, well, this proves it's all to do with teenagers, was obviously Enfield, as you can see here with Guy Lyon Playfair and Maurice Gross, and a rare photo of all four of the Hodgson children. But this is one of the other aspects of that particular case I think often gets overlooked, is that the youngest child was in special education because he had a variety of challenges. But everybody considers the haunting to have focused on the two girls and not the other son that was remaining there. The problems that the family had with their family unit is well reported, and as I've said, there are far more learned and knowledgeable people on this particular case to dive into it. But once again, once I've looked through these cases, I now look back at Enfield and begin to think, well, could it have been the son that was the actual focus, and the frustration was aimed at his family for whatever reason because of what was going on? And mistakenly, the focus at the time was on the girls, when perhaps it should have been the child that was actually struggling socially and educationally at that particular period, on top of the family problems that they were having. And so it kind of makes me look back at some of these cases and reassess them through a different lens, really, because as I say, I always thought it was one of those cases. Now I'm not too sure. I'm not one of those people who thinks it was a complete hoax, regardless, because I think there are too many additional witnesses and too many other incidents that occurred throughout that case, as well as the fact that Morris and Guy were very upfront saying that they'd caught the girls cheating, for it to have been that. And this excuse that children are the greatest magicians in the world that is often put forward, I think is nonsensical as well, because if they were, I don't think there'd be a struggling family in a council house in North London in the 1970s. If your daughter was that talented, she'd have been on Opportunity Knocks or something, quite clearly. So that's not to say hoaxing doesn't go on, and there has been numerous nonsensical cases of people doing that. So I'm not, once again, throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. I like to try and stand in the middle, but dismissing something through explainable things does not negate everything else that we've captured, and that applies to most cases, I think. But when you've got other weird cases, another prime example of a poltergeist case that does not involve anybody who's a teenager is Humpty Doo, investigated by the marvellous Paul Cropper and a dear friend, Tony Healy, which occurred in the into the mid to late 90s. Humpty Doo was a very peculiar case, one that burned very brightly, but everybody who lived in that property was between the ages of 25 and 32. There wasn't a teenager in sight. Now, that friend unit, because they were all friends that lived together, had suffered a shared trauma of a dear friend of theirs being killed in a horrific car crash several months before the manifestations occurred at Humpty Doo, as the case became known. But this was quite an odd one because it was leaving messages in stones, as I'm sure anybody's been aware of, as well as some of the other things. There's also the very amusing series of exorcisms that were done until I think they were running out of religions to come to the house, and because it didn't seem to like anything until they got an indigenous elder to come round. And he seemed to be the only one that didn't get a kick up, a paranormal kick up the arse by this, because even the Greek Orthodox priest they brought round had his book ripped from his hands and thrown across. Once again, explained away as one of the women in the case wanting attention, and she was a fraudster, a hoaxer. There were numerous incidents happen when she wasn't in the house, and everybody involved in this case, as far as I'm aware, because of what happened with the Australian media, who basically tried to stitch them up as a gotcha, they've rarely, if ever, spoken to anybody else other than Paul and Tony, because they don't trust anybody after what happened, which is sad because it's nearly 30 years ago. And I'd really like to hear from them in regards to how they view what happened in that 4 or 5 month period back in 98, 99, as well as the fact that I think we live in a more enlightened time in regards to people who have experienced the paranormal, and don't suffer the repercussions that occurred in this particular case. And as you can see here, there's one of the messages on the left-hand side. As I said, the messages that were being left seem to refer to this car crash. As you can see on the floor here, the word car is spelt. They would find other messages: fire, death, burn, pain, and all these pebbles that were being used had come from the outside. So they were able to check that the pebbles were found around there, but there obviously wasn't a way for them to get in the house. As you can see in the other photo here, were the knives that were constantly being found in places. They were found under cushions, under the settee, under people's pillows, in people's beds. They were being left in very dangerous positions. And they would collect them up, put them back in a drawer, and then they would go back to the drawer, and the drawer would be empty, and the knives had been placed around again. If you're not that au fait with this particular case and others of his ilk, I cannot recommend Tony and Paul's book, Australian Poltergeist, enough. It's incredible because, once again, it gives you a real insight, because obviously a large part of it is to do with Humpty Doo, but Paul and Tony have looked at least 80 other poltergeist cases in Australia, and you very quickly start to see there are cases involving people in their 30s, 40s. There's no kids there. So what is going on with that particular case? And so for me, I'm completely, not that I would say I'm completely against this whole teenager. I personally have now come to the point that I think the poltergeist phenomenon is a variety of things that cause similar results. Be that apports, things moving around, disembodied voices, people being pushed, furniture being moved, scratching, coins appearing from nowhere, the usual things. I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all, but I think there are a lot about quite a few things these days in the Fortean realm. And so, weirdly, for me, what people have always tried to explain the poltergeist phenomenon reminds me of another thing that I really am fascinated by, and explanations really annoy me, and that is spontaneous human combustion. Because the general consensus of spontaneous human combustion is that they can all be explained by the wick effect, which is fine. However, and I do not understand why nobody points this out whenever anybody says, well, it's the wick effect. The burning point for bones is 3,000 degrees centigrade. Even in crematoriums, when you are exposed to temperatures of 2 to 2,500 degrees for a considerable period of time, the bones do not break down. And so in a crematorium, after the body has been burned, they have to get everything together, and then they put it in a big washing machine with some massive ball bearings, and that smashes the bones to bits. This is the problem I have with the wick effect, because the wick effect does not explain how people's bones turn to ash in spontaneous human combustion cases. It might explain the slow burn. It might explain the localization of the burning, though I'm not particularly sure it explains much, to be honest. However, it does not explain the ash situation whatsoever. Doesn't cover it. And so for me, once again, I don't think spontaneous human combustion is a paranormal event. I think it is a certain set of situations that cause an extreme chemical reaction. For some reason, I don't know what it is. I don't know what causes it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I think I know what does it, but I don't think it's paranormal. I think it's some kind of chemical situation. Once again, I would recommend Larry Arnold's brilliant book on spontaneous human combustion, Ablaze. There is one particular case in that which kind of disproves the wick effect from top to bottom, where a woman sent her daughter to the shop to buy her some cigarettes. 20 minutes later, she came back. As you can see on the left-hand side, that's what was left of her. That happened in 20 minutes. No ifs, no buts, no maybes. Now, I'm sorry, that's not a wick effect. It's remarkable, really. And so when people suggest that the poltergeist is teenage angst, it always reminds me of the wick effect now, because it only explains so much. And for me, it's frustrating that putting forward an explanation that doesn't explain it properly, I find counterproductive, because the wick effect in spontaneous human combustion does not explain the bones turning to ash. And as you can see in both of these pictures, there's not a lot left of people's bodies here. There's no skeleton. Even in a house fire, skeletons are left, as I say, because the temperature has to reach such a thing. And if something's 3,000 degrees hot, in both of those pictures, there's going to be nothing else left. And there's not going to be bits of people left. It's all or nothing in a fire that hot, as any fireman will tell you. And so I think we just need to start looking at it in a more forensic way. You may agree or disagree with me. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that everybody who's talked about poltergeists or what their personal experiences is wrong. What I'm saying is it's not a one-size-fits-all. There's more to this situation than meets the eye. And personally, I think this is something to do with chemical reactions or a release of energy that we have yet to have a handle on with our understanding of how the body and the brain works. So I hope that gives you food for thought. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated, my friend. That was certainly the ride, wasn't it? Where do we end up there? I've heard some interesting theories, actually. I'll throw them by you in a while. I mean, when I was at school, I've shared this story a couple of times. We had a metal railing to the staircase going between two different floors. And on this, on top of this, the handrail was a dark plastic. If you put your hand on the plastic and you run your hand along it, because of the blazers that everyone wore, it actually would build up static. And what happened, I saw this twice myself, where girls, of course, this is the early 90s, where, their hair got caught alight. They obviously used to cover themselves with hairspray, the big kind of hair. And I saw that twice myself, where people were moving their hand along this, and all of a sudden, their hair would kind of ignite along the back as the static kicked through. And I always wondered, was that the cause of human combustion? Is it the fact that there's a spontaneous spark in their environment? But you are absolutely right when it comes to these bodies clearly experience an extreme form of heat in a very localized space. It almost looks like something has moved through them, or has almost like probed them, kind of like, who is this? What is this? And perhaps what they are irradiating might well have been the cause of the problem. It's like, I don't know, if you can imagine some kind of alien probe or some kind of weird device just scanning who these people are, the radiation maybe, that might explain why their legs are still there, their arms are still there. It's a directed blast, as it were. They're trying to check out who we are, but that's speculation nonetheless. But the static effect I always thought was an idea to explain it. But no, these bodies are left in some considerable state that is a challenge to explain, isn't it?
Well, this is the reason I've kind of connected them both is, for me, they're two peas in a pod, because I think there's some sort of, as I say, some kind of kinetic energy, some kind of buildup of chemical release that's going on here that we just can't comprehend. And so that's why I've linked spontaneous human combustion into it, because for me, as I say, the explanation can only go so far. And it's the same when you start looking at the poltergeist cases. And yes, I've mentioned some, but there are dozens and dozens and dozens that there are no teenagers involved. Nobody's upset. Nobody's heartbroken. Nobody's got a crap home life. They're just people who have just been living. I mean, the poltergeist is another prime example where, you've got a group of old guys who work in a lawnmower shop, for God's sakes. There's no children there. And they ended up, when the guy retired, when he left there, the ghost moved in with him.
Yes,
went to his house.
Yes.
So what's going on there?
I mean, of course, for ASSAP, not something we've ever investigated, but of course we know Keith Linder quite well, who of course is the sort of the Bothell Hell.
Yes.
He's been on with ASSAP. Yeah, he's been on with ASSAP 3 times now, I think he has. Let's kind of give us a bit of a yearly update. And the last one he gave us was about things that were not recognised, things that had been overlooked. That was his last kind of talk. And he was speaking about the lady who appeared to him when he was upstairs at his desk, and this figure, appeared to be carrying laundry or something, doing something kind of mundane, walked past the door, and when he went to investigate, she appeared to be attempting to walk through the wall, and then she hit the wall, and then she was surprised, and then she ran away after spotting him, and then she was kind of running away from him. And then there was a situation where he then ran into her, or he thinks he might have run into her again, at a later point in her life where they were on the opposite side of the same perspective. So really weird time stuff appears to happen around poltergeist phenomena as well, which you also find in the UAP cases as well. I'm really intrigued about what that link could be. Some weird time stuff going on. I don't know, but I'm no expert. When we do, you spot the patterns, and you start. There must be something happening within this space. Caroline, you are a person who's been tickling the poltergeist for some time.
Yeah, it's an absolute interest of mine. Obviously, being in the position I am with our team and also with ASSAP, we've had the opportunities of looking at certain cases, quite high level, quite high phenomena that's been alleged to have occurred. So you do start looking at patterns and pattern matching and seeing what it is that you can take from one case to another, the tropes again. What's your thought process? Because I know that you said that children haven't been prevalent in some of these cases that have been highlighted. But what's your thought process on contagion? Could perhaps something have been in place and disconnected, and then use the contagion effect to go with that family without the child being there? I mean, I personally don't believe that children are or teenagers or sexually angry women. I don't think that, that necessarily is a person. I think it could be a part of the brain that connects to some kind of PK. And this is my personal feelings on it. Of course, nobody's right because nothing's been proven.
Correct.
But I'm just interested to know, what's your thoughts on contagion?
I prescribe to that idea in certain cases as well. I agree entirely. I think I don't know, very similar to what you're suggesting there, Caroline. I think some people are like a perfect battery, but they don't. It doesn't happen until they're in the perfect environment for it. And whatever way it connects to them, be it some kind of buildup of energy in there, whether it's the way that their anatomy works, whatever, there is something that these people can plug into, whether they realize it or not, whether that's something feeding off them. And I don't necessarily mean that in some kind of sort of demonic presence or something, some kind of energy or whatever, that can utilize somebody, or someone's giving off enough electricity. Because like I say, we've all met people who you shake your hands and you're like, oh, blimey, because they seem to be able to do it to lots of people. So it's them, they're the ones that are permanently charged up. And I certainly think that there is a lot to that contagion aspect of certain individual, wrong person at the wrong place at the right time for us, perhaps. Definitely, I think, because I think there is something electrical involved in this. So, there's something going on at some level, whether the body is channeling it or it is firing something out that then reacts in a certain way that causes certain cases, definitely.
So for those people who are new to the paranormal or don't have the knowledge of poltergeist, could you maybe explain in your own words what contagion is?
Oh, no.
If you're not happy, ask and I will fill in the gap.
Okay, well, my personal interpretation is that contagion can be that someone is a conduit for a particular experience or haunting that essentially infects the environment, and there it seems to take a life of its own, whether or not that conduit is no longer there. The infection has already spread, and therefore that's what causes the internal contagion. That's my personal interpretation. Yeah.
I think you've almost got that spot on for word for word. I think some people describe it as an agent-born activity, and when it gets to a certain strength or peakness, of how long it's been around, and because obviously, like you say, most poltergeist cases, they grow and grow and grow, and then they just kind of fizzle. When they get to that point, some people are alleged to think and believe that the contagion can separate from the host, from the agent, and become a free moving energy. That's how I would also describe it to be, along the same kind of description. But yes,
Oh.
totally nailed it.
Wait, maybe I've then viewed what I think to be contagion to be something different. So I actually thought,
What's your thought?
my understanding was, and again, thank you guys for putting me right. I thought it was when, if you were to go to a location that is reputedly haunted, or it has a kind of poltergeist element, it would be where something that attaches to a new person, and then those experiences would then follow that person as they leave that location. So thus it has multiplied. So, you know, an investigator would go to a location where it has nothing attached to them, shall we say, no experiences happens around them, and then the poltergeist phenomenon then also appears to then follow them home, and then that appears to affect another person. That's how I thought contagion meant.
So in the talk that I've given for ASSAP and the articles that I've written, that element isn't incorrect. It's not totally incorrect, because contagion is when somebody not connected to the host or the property visits the host in a separate area, or the property with or without the host, and the entity, the energy, goes away with them. So you're not incorrect, Chris.
Okay.
There's just more elements. It's the host that then disconnects from the energy in that house, and you've either got to have contact with the host or the house, and then the contagion goes with you.
So, because contagion also implies that it is multiplying, that it is spreading. I mean, then you start talking about it's almost like a virality in its wording alone. So, and that's perhaps why my thoughts had gone that way. Is this some kind of survival mechanism of the entity, that it knows that this person it's powering down, it's not going to be a good conduit for much longer, and thus it wants to go beyond the house where it might well be currently fixed, which is that's a fucking bizarre perception as it is. You know, that it's somehow locked in a house and can't leave this room, or it can't leave the building. You know, and then suddenly it's invited and can leave the building and can go elsewhere. That's weird in itself, that it is following a kind of rule. And then, of course, if it goes somewhere else, and then does it then also have the ability to then split up and multiply again? Yeah, can it jump to another person? I don't know. But then is it bilocated?
I think the definition has probably changed in your belief structure.
Yeah, possibly.
Because poltergeists aren't known to be sentient beings. They are not a free thinking energy that was a person, or, you know, a created energy, you know, into a person. Then they're not. When the poltergeist contagion goes away, it's still working on the host, the agent's thought process. And I'm guessing it probably comes from that connection where the host has met this person that takes the energy away. And the connection is obviously subconscious still, but it is that thought process that's still from the agent and the host that's creating the contagion.
Okay. Maybe my poor understanding of it, but I get where you're coming from with that. Because
Would you agree, Paul?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's interesting as well, because you know, with both of you raising points there, you see that kind of situation occur in occasional cryptid and UAP witnesses, where they will have one particular experience and then they will go home and begin to sort of experience a haunting. And you would suggest, well, what's going on there? Because they're not usually connected, and I'm not a fan of explaining one Fortean mystery with another, because I just think that doesn't help anybody. But I mean, there's more than several of those kinds of cases, which are fascinating in their own way, because they're very different to your standard cryptid or UAP, because most of them, there isn't the secondary sort of incident that goes on. And you always have to sort of worry about anybody that's claimed to have a ghost, seen a cryptid, visited a UFO. You know, is there anything that this person hasn't experienced? But there's enough of it to make it an interesting sub-genre under those particular categories, I think, that in certain occasions, that it seems contagion affects all aspects of the Fortean realm, whether people want it or not.
So what came first, the chicken, the egg, or the cryptid?
Bigfoot layer chicken.
One question, though, just touching on something very briefly that you mentioned about energy, like an electricity, that you touch people and you can feel that energy surge. This is a nice hook to hand over to Christian to answer with you and to discuss, because if that is the case, do you think that these people are also the ones that have the lamp post phenomena where the lights would go out and walk by them and things?
So you mean the what's called SLI, isn't it? Street light
Interference.
That's right. Yeah. So I've seen this firsthand. But I do wonder if people do somehow have, I don't know, some kind of varying electrical field around them, or is there something potentially that is unseen that is walking with them that has that ability? Not them intentionally, but there's a third aspect that we don't consider here. That might well be the source of it.
I think the big problem we've got is that often people like to stay in their own particular wheelhouse. So I would not be surprised if certain individuals have other weird responses to normal things, such as the streetlight phenomena, or, as I mentioned earlier on, people not being able to wear digital watches or blowing up their microwave or whatever, or they get headaches in Wi-Fi situations, which we know some people do, sadly. I think it's one of those things that people just haven't looked outside of the immediate area of a case, I think, and they haven't looked into these secondary aspects of, is it affecting different things that were going on? Because, I mean, there have been cases where you would have people who work in a haunted building, and yet when they all go home, nothing seems to happen to them. That seems to be very localized. And so I think it's all about asking the right questions. And for me, as we've developed, we've begun to sort of pull ideas from other disciplines and other fields to use in these kind of situations. Whereas, because I've spoken to so many researchers over the years who have become Fortean rather than paranormal or cryptid, because when they go and ask people about, have you seen a Bigfoot? Did you see whatever? And they'll say, well, maybe not. But however, I've seen something else, which is not connected to what they normally investigate. And then they suddenly uncover something strange. And I've spoken to so many people over the years where there are reports of people talking about all kinds of weird things in Bigfoot cases, UFO cases, that particular researcher didn't give a damn about, and therefore nobody's bothered to follow it up. It's always sort of secondary or 5 years after, and then somebody else comes along asking the right questions, and they say, oh, well, I told somebody about this, and they just didn't care.
It's intriguing, actually, because I think there certainly is space, at least for data collection within that. I don't think, like you were talking there, is investigators would pay attention to certain stuff. You know, maybe a function is to have a checklist of check boxes. Yes, it might well be a ghost case. What else are you also experiencing? At least if I'm going away from here, you know, someone else can potentially add a data point here where they've seen this stuff in the same region or area, and they also hit the same point. So therefore you can essentially make a heat map of those kind of phenomena in one particular area. It's almost odd. Just if we were to say about the people who have the watch, for instance, let's start with the watch. So if people were to have, I'm aware of these people too, they can't wear digital watches, or if they wear a physical watch, it always stops. They think there's some kind of interference. I mean, it'd be really good to find, you know, what's actually the pattern between them. You know, could we ask 20 people who have this? We have social media tools these days. You know, I'm pretty sure between, say, 5 or 6 organizations, we could share out to potentially thousands of people who might say, well, I have this. And then you could get a nice data sample, a pool of people who claim this. And then, actually, what else do you experience in and around yourself? What else is yours? And I think that there's a research paper to be made with that. Some very simple points to be put together. Yeah. And I don't think people do it too often. I think investigators are almost a little bit selfish. They want to keep the case for themselves.
Yes.
You know, there's not much willing to pass it on to others. I mean, I've experienced this myself with groups not wanting to hand over their master tapes, as it were, or their information, or to put it to a peer review of another group to go check that location and to see what's there, and then to compare notes independently to see if they experience the same stuff. I'm aware that some groups do work like that.
Yeah. Well, as with anything, gatekeeping's always been a problem in this particular field, but it's also, I think, especially, it's harder now because it's monetized.
Yeah.
And so people don't want to give up this super haunted location or where Bigfoot eats apples or where they meet the aliens, because they want to be the person who solves the case, who becomes world famous overnight. As you say, I'm very open with it. I'm of that ilk as well. I think, you know, many brains make a problem lighter. And I think enabling people to share data, like you say, peer reviewing these. This is the thing. People don't peer review in the paranormal or the Fortean. Basically, this is my case and I'm going to tell you about it. Well, can I go there? No. Well, why not? Can I look at your notes? Can we compare? You would do that.
Compare notes. That's always a no. That's just weird.
And for me, I just don't understand that. But it's one of those things that I like to rail against, as with anything. Like when people complain about some of the guests I have on, I don't really care. It's my show. I'm not really bothered who I'm speaking to. Thank you.
I mean, we had Eric Dunlin on. I'm not sure you know who that is. French academic.
Yes.
So he has a large macro PK, I think is his website, macropk.org, and he basically has collated something like 5,000 reports of European poltergeists. His intention is basically to create a academic archive where they can be searched of all the aspects of them. Really, really good website, but he's so underfunded. There's just like 2 people working on it. You know, it's academically funded, but essentially it's to a point where after 5 years they haven't even got 10% of their cases up online yet.
Yeah,
because it's a manual task. He's obviously got other work to do. And I would love to use that kind of database and say, throw the ASSAP poltergeist archives into them. You know, I'm sure the SBR has a massive archive as well. I'm sure there is. Think about how many people go out in investigations and groups every single week and experience poltergeist phenomena. What are they contributing? Where is that data going? What is it? Is it they're posting on their Facebook wall? 10% of their friends might see it. Is that it? You know, how is that contributing to the larger, wider topic that can be academically looked at? And I think that's the reason why it's not taken serious.
Yeah, precisely. And it also... go on, sorry, Caroline.
Sorry. I think also in the case of lay people going out and submitting stuff for uploading for evidence purposes, there could be that watering down of the effect of getting positive results because of their lack of knowledge of the subject. And like in America, everything that people experience has a religious connotation of a demon attachment. So, you know, how many times have I been to a case where they say, I've got a poltergeist, which is why I wrote my 15 signs of a poltergeist talk. These are the things.
Okay, let's bring it back to the live where we are here today. I'm actually, the reason I was letting it go is because I was waiting Paul to join us, and then I was going to kick into the conversation. I had actually chatted to him about 5 to 7, and he said he was going to join us just gone 8 o'clock, and I was hoping that he would have joined us by now. So
he's here. He is here.
Is he? I'm looking at the list and I can't see him.
Yeah, Paul B. There he is.
Yes.
Right in front of me.
Oh, there he is. There he is.
I've been lurking for half an hour, Christian. I do
brilliant,
apologise.
I was maybe even further down. How are you doing, my man?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well. It's a bit weird watching myself, but thank you.
It's always weird when you hear your own voice, isn't it? You have to get used to it after a while because it sounds so different. Because we, of course, hear very differently to how other people hear us.
Yes, but no, thank you again. Like I say, thank you for the opportunity at the time. It was great fun. So yes, and I'm glad to see some people have enjoyed what I was waffling on about. So thank you.
Yeah, and what is great actually, I was looking at the chat box here, is how people have very different perspectives on it. Some people are very skeptical. Poltergeists, do they even exist? You know, is there anything going? Are we investigating it any differently than we did 100 years ago? What's actually moving forward in the field? And to be honest, I don't know the answer to all the questions that get thrown our way. But it's, perhaps there is a concern that I guess the paranormal hasn't really moved forward to say that there's more cases than ever. Is there? I don't know.
Well, I mean, as we were touching on, I think one of the big problems we've got these days is that a lot of things get taken away from the public and simply appear on a YouTube channel, and if that's not the format or the rigorous investigation that perhaps we need, then these kind of things just drift away or fall by the wayside, I think. And it does seem rather frustrating. I think that some of the aspects of it is that you've obviously had a lot of mainstream science who are just not interested in it. But then I think you've also got a lot of people who are dyed-in-the-wool paranormal investigators who seem to view the scientific rigor or the methodology of analyzing and collating data and looking for touch points and trying to see what correlations and connections we can have across cases. They just don't seem to want to do that. Now, that may be because of their the way they work or their experience in life, or it just might be that they don't have the understanding of that kind of sort of results and methodology in regards to it. And I think on face value, I think, yeah, some people would suggest we haven't moved on for 100 years. But then again, you would also say perhaps in certain aspects, too many people are putting faith into technology that they don't understand, or people aren't aware of what is the purpose of it. Why do we use EMF readers, cat balls, things like that? Where's those kinds of things? So it's a double-edged sword, and I think we need a bit of both to go forward without sort of putting all our eggs in one basket.
Yeah, I think that you certainly ticked that box for me there. Like I think Robert says it here quite well. It's not paranormal; it's a personal quest and trying to understand our own personal perhaps placement in the universe. I think that's probably quite true, isn't it?
Yes,
we're on a bit of a personal journey to, what's on the other side. Are we going to live forever? What is the mystery for ourselves? Do we want to enrich the universe? And maybe what it really is, we're just asking questions of our own mortality.
Yes.
But Caroline, how goes your health at the moment, darling? I know you were. I informed everyone that you were at hospital when we literally started this. Jenny, how are you feeling now, my love?
Yeah, so it was one of my appointments that I've got in the long list that they need to do to check up to make sure I've got a brain. So again, this is the second part. They still have confirmed I have a brain. So unfortunately, the machine wasn't working very well, so I need to go back.
So I've realised my keyboard here is tapping away. Paul, I think, wants to ask some questions to you. And of course, everyone can. I guess we didn't take questions throughout, but I guess if you want to, feel free to jump in. Paul, I'll ask to unmute you if you want to come on board and bat your question our way to our guest.
Thanks very much. Are you picking me up there?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
That's grand. Well, thanks to Paul, first of all, for his presentation and talk, but I'm going to sort of try and drag it back a bit to Enfield. Okay, that's partly because I've just finished writing a book about Enfield, which will be out in the new year, and partly because I recently, then, as part of that, listened to the podcast you did with Supernatural Circumstances.
Yes.
Yeah, and ask a few things about that and raise a few points on that. First of all, in your talk tonight, you mentioned this thing about children not being the best magicians and illusionists and ventriloquists in the world. Now, that's a really cheap trope that was developed by Maurice Grosse. It's a straw man argument. I don't see why anybody would take it seriously. He sets up this argument that you have to be a great illusionist to do what happened at Enfield. Not true. Totally untrue. But he does it because he can then say, and obviously the girls aren't world-class illusionists, therefore it can't be them. And I think they used other strawman arguments. It couldn't possibly have been lifted. It couldn't possibly have been done by the girls. But they don't ever bother to prove it. They just make an assumption. And that's a running saw through their investigation, the use of false man arguments. So I just wanted to mention that in passing. In the other podcast that you did, you agreed with Mike Brown that about 95% of the things that happened at Enfield were paranormal, which means about 1,900 incidents were paranormal. Can you just briefly explain how you managed to work that out and what sources you used other than the Playfair book?
Essentially, I think looking at what was going on, I mean, as you touched on there in regards to that, the children's illusionist was the Enfield case was not the first one to put that. The skeptical argument was not put forward first about Janet and that. But I appreciate what you say in regards to that, Paul, because the famous Popper case from the States from 20 years earlier, that was written off as the kid being an excellent junior magician. So it is a something that is often put forwards as the catch-all sort of explanation of it. It's always kids mucking about, which always gets on my nerve because sometimes it can't. You have a look at certain aspects of it. I mean, looking at the interviews, having spoken to Guy a couple of times in the past prior to his passing, liaising with Dr. David Clark and the gentleman who worked for the Daily Mirror as part of that were some of the reasons that kind of gave me my personal interpretation of that is that the vast majority of it did seem out of the standard realms of explanation. Of course, there are things that you could
Look,
easily
can I just say, what evidence? You've had conversations with people and watched some documentaries, but you're saying that 1900 approximately
in my
of the
personal
incidents.
opinion,
Yes, but I don't want
that.
opinion. This is the Society of the Scientific Study of Autonomous Phenomenon. So it's not really, opinion isn't enough. So I'm asking, do you have evidence that 1900 of those cases were paranormal?
Well, if you want it to put it like that, then obviously not.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. It's just that, again, it's one of these tropes that gets repeated. All these cases, so many of them must be true. But then when you actually ask people for the evidence, it's scant to zero, or it's just answered in an anecdote. And this is what perpetuates these sorts of beliefs and thoughts. Okay, so I mean, and one of the things I think the case you took in particular, where the other podcast was the case of the voices, and you presented that as a, I guess, a very good example or a strong example of paranormal events going on. And is that right?
Which particular case are you referring to now, Paul?
It's the voice. It's the voice of Bill.
Mm-hmm.
And you gave that as an example of a strong case for it being paranormal. Yeah.
Well, yes, because when it was recorded, I mean, when I spoke to Dr. Melvin Willing about that, he was
Yeah.
the gentleman that informed me that obviously when they did the recordings of that, they were able to say that where the sound was coming from, and also the fact that Janet had her mouth taped up with water in it.
Yes, that's right. And I've read Willing's book, and it's interesting you talk about the mouth taped up because in Willing's book, not Playfair says she was still able to speak, but not as well. Willing in his book specifically says that she coughed, she spluttered, she almost choked, and all she could do was grunt. So that's what Willing actually reports in his book. I can't remember the exact page it's on. So you've got Willing doing the transcription, and that's what he says. But then you've got Playfair's version, which is nothing like what Willing says.
Mm.
I mean, and obviously Willing's book repeatedly catches out Gross and Playfair in the way that they suppress evidence and misrepresent evidence. I mean, it's a case study in it for people who've actually read that book.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant.
Okay. You also refer to the example. I think in the other thing you refer to the example of the death and the information about the death of Wilkin. I think that was one thing that you said was relevant and a good example. Have I got that right?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, when it's researched, it's nonsense. It's a trope. Hemorrhage, going to sleep, going blind, repeated often. But the birth certificate shows that Wilkin died of a heart attack. It's a signed death certificate that says it was a coronary thrombosis. And with a coronary thrombosis, it's not a hemorrhage. And with a coronary thrombosis, you don't tend to fall asleep. And there's very little links to people going blind. Now, once that came out, it's very interesting. that Playfair stopped making direct references to that particular case in anything like detail. But he never actually had the decency to come public and say, we got it wrong.
That's
Okay.
fascinating. That really is.
I was not aware of that, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's okay. But the thing is, they did know about it because there is one of the documentaries, I think it's in the 90s, in which Gross appears quite a bit. And in that, they show the death certificate. So I'm assuming Maurice Gross must have known about it. He must have watched the programme he appeared in.
You would think so, surely, yeah.
Yeah, certainly so, for sure.
And if I could just one more, then I'll shut the heck up. And that's the sound of the voice, this sort of deathly growl. Whereas again, something that Gross and Playfair made great play by. That Janet, and again, it's in a sense, it's one of these straw man arguments. They said she couldn't possibly have spoken like that for as long as she did without doing serious damage to her vocal cords. And therefore, the implication is something else must have been doing the speaking because it couldn't have been her. Okay. What's interesting about that is first, that in Playfair's own book, when he speaks to the professor of linguistics, Professor Forsan, who I think virtually invented the machine that they used, Forsan tells him absolutely clearly, you can't make that assumption, that children's voices are so flexible that you cannot make this assertion that she would have had a sore throat or a damaged throat. What do Gross and Playfair do? They ignore it. They ignore the expert and they keep perpetuating that story. That's very strange to me. But the thing is, it's the story that gets perpetuated, not the facts. Two more things for the people linked to that happen later but are relevant. If you go on any sort of YouTube and put America's Got Talent in, you can see girls 8, 9, 10 singing with what they call death growls, a particular brand of heavy metal, where they sing with enormous ferocity. And create these noises, and then as soon as they finish singing, they're interviewed and they talk normally. There's no problem there at all. And these people do sets of 40, 50 minutes non-stop, no problem. The assertion that young girls would be certain to have bad throats is a nonsense. And more recently, 2024, the Voice Lab in Utah University, which looked very much at heavy metal and death growls and young females, confirmed all that. So you're in a
Paul,
position.
what's your book, and when is it due to come out? Because I think it's likely to be a bit of a debunk. I think perhaps we ought to get a copy.
It's going to be early in the new year. Obviously, 50 years since the case of the case coming out, and there's a lot more on. I mean, why didn't Gross and Playfair use Christopher Melbourne, use Ray Allen, ventriloquist, to see how they could properly test? They just did these taping up things, which were ridiculous. And I should say, if people want to hear some of that actual taping up of mouths and use of water, you can hear it on the Apple TV documentary. Which is great because they use a lot of the recordings. Yes. And Gross gets very angry with Janet when she rips the tape off and spits the water out because she's choking. I mean, if somebody spoke to my daughter like that, he'd be out of the house straight away. Very rude and totally unnecessary. But of course, he was disappointed. And not being able to speak with water in your mouth doesn't tell you anything about ventriloquism, because some ventriloquists can do it with water in the mouth and some can't. Last point, and it goes nicely back to Willin and his book. One of the sections that Willin refers to in his book is Bill talking about 68 dogs that lived in his house.
Yes.
Labradors and Chihuahuas, and they were all 6 foot tall.
Yes.
Now, this never appeared in any of the books. So why is that? It's because they're suppressing information that's inconvenient to what they want to, the line they want to push, and it screws over a lot of people. Lots of people in good faith, like yourself, just want to get to the heart of it, but they don't tell you this stuff.
I think when you, like you say, I think that's the kind of thing where you have cases, because I often find when you have recordings of alleged myth messages or whatever, Paul, that they often, as you mentioned there, they seem to ignore the weird stuff, because that's just, that would be nonsensical, wouldn't it? I mean, why is he talking about 6-foot dogs and I have
Exactly.
64? You just think, what's going on here? But then you see so many cases where gobbledygook is often put forward as some kind of, oh, well, they're struggling to get their message through or whatever. Whereas,
Yeah.
I mean, you raised some very interesting points there, which is intriguing. And it's frustrating, as you say, because at the end of the day, we all want to understand what's going on rather than perpetuate, as you point out, some of the myths that go on, and just get to the heart of the matter and the real strangeness that goes on, because
Exactly.
it does us all a disservice, Paul.
Absolutely, and I'll now shut up after this bit. Is that one of the things that, as you probably noticed, that Bill asks lots and lots of questions about periods.
Yes.
This allegedly dead man in his 60s, possibly 70s, if you add on the time he's been dead,
Yes.
keeps asking lots of questions until Hugh Pincott has to actually, stand with his back to Janet, because he's not allowed to look at her, and give her a long explanation of what periods are. Okay. Now, that was the day before she had her first period. But, Gross and Playfair completely, they do a couple of quick paragraphs on that and continue to believe that, Bill is it's actually a 61-year-old man who wants lots of information about periods rather than a 12-year-old girl about to have her first period. Now, again, it's disingenuous research to just ignore that. It might not be relevant, but you've certainly got to, as a researcher and an investigator, is dig into that. And they didn't, because admitting it was to do with periods would mean it was Janet, and that would mean it wasn't paranormal. And they had their own line that they were going to take, sadly. But so thank you very much, Paul. Anyhow, thank that.
No, thank you.
Paul, it's actually really important that you actually have such an intimate knowledge of a very particular case. I mean, before your book goes to publication, could we pull on you to have you come and do a presentation and a talk about these facts? Because that would be really good for you. To would that be something you would be willing to do?
Oh yeah, of course, and I will be doing that. Depending
Fantastic.
on what
yeah.
Excellent.
We've got a gap next week. We've got a gap next week, Paul, if you want it.
Not then, but I will like to do it. Yeah.
Oh, Paul, thank you. Because I guess it really comes down to when you have a particular, focus on a particular case where you can reel off detail. People really want to hear that, and I could feel your frustration going, I need to get this off my chest. I need to find, why do people say these things? And I kind of get where you were coming from. But no, really, really interesting points. Thank you.
Pleasure.
So, Caroline, if you could get him touch base with Paul and get him in for to time and when his book comes out, it'd be great to promote that. So, Caroline, would you do a favour? And there is some questions here, and I know you've been absent for a little while. Would you be okay to run through some of these?
Yeah, not a problem. So running down through, the first things that we've got is Mike Bembo Jackson. I think he's talking about it was at 7:40, so it was early on. Paying less attention to the puberty factor seems fair to me. I think a lot of that interpretation came from psychoanalytical ideas. Gosh, that was a big word for me to say after my day. Seeping into interpretations combined with the arrival of the teenager in the post-war years. Absolutely. Did you all get that? I'm not on mute, am I?
No, I can hear you just fine.
Yeah.
You were quiet afterwards.
I think it's one of those things that Paul's touched on. We have these tropes and these cliches, and that's one of the prime ones when it comes to poltergeist phenomenon, isn't it? Certainly in the latter part of the 20th century, as the teenager has risen into popular culture, it seems to have always been that one of the constant repeating factors in the ones that get famous, or the ones that get the publicity from around the world. That seems to be one of the catalysts. So it is something, I think, that needs to be pulled away from it.
So, I mean, I've got this friend of mine who's a very intelligent chap, and he likes to tell everybody how intelligent he is on a regular basis. Not necessarily. No, that's not you, Chris. You are intelligent.
I don't know about that. I'm a moron. So.
So he was talking to me about poltergeist the other day, because I brought it up in a conversation. He went, "Oh, poltergeist, that's where those teenage girls," and then he starts reeling off all these cases. I let him talk because you can't interrupt him, you can't overtalk him. And then I just said, "Oh dear," rolled my eyes at him and said, "Do keep up, please, Mark. We're way beyond that now." So yeah, but even to these really intelligent people who've got a good grasp of paranormal, they still are under the belief system that it's to do with teenage girls or hormonal. That's the next one.
Yes.
Hormonal women going through the menopause.
Yeah.
Really, when all we want to do is just kill people. Not have
Another good
poltergeist
fan.
activity.
Sending out some kind of female tulpa to go and smash someone. Yeah, I got the idea. I know the feeling.
Yeah, I mean, if that was the case, that all hormonal women wanted to kill people, surely it'll be overrun the prisons with us, over 50-year-olds.
Yes.
Yeah, keep up, Paul. Keep up, Mark. So the next thing, Malcolm Dyer says, psychological explanations are easy to table because psychology is a snake oil based. Real research is often discouraged. It's all about participants' minds, and you should seek explanations within psychoanalysis and dismiss the paranormal.
I think
The
that's
thing
one
is,
of. Oh, sorry, go on, Caroline.
if I can just give my thought process to that, paranormal, if you look at the word, it's anything that's outside of the normal of our understanding that we know now. We're only making assumptions, so we have to kind of use some kind of snake oil because basing it on what we do have scientific rigor and we do have scientific principles that we can apply, but we haven't proved that ghosts exist. So at the moment, it's just like sticking your finger up into the wind, isn't it? Gathering data and finding where your patterns are. That's what's happened. That's what's brought me to where I am with paranormal, in particular poltergeist, because of the cases that I've looked at, the patterns that are attached. And then you start placing things into areas. Do you agree?
Well, I think we have to use the full remits of the science that's available to us. And I think there are too many occasions in the past where we've had people who are clearly suffering from psychological injury or mental health crises that depending on the people, I mean, growing up where I grew up in Barnsley, there was a very famous case of an exorcism that went horribly wrong for all the wrong reasons, which led to a horrific murder a few days after that in the 1970s up here. And that was a man who had had a serious mental health crisis. But because of the associations and the life he led at that time, he was part of a sort of offsuit of the Protestant church up here. And so he was basically told he was possessed rather than he may be mentally ill. And obviously it was just a final sort of putting the cherry on the top of his personal situation. The exorcism was the push that sent him into a horrific situation. And so I think when you often get these kind of situations where people with no psychological training or experience of mental health or things like that, I think we need to be more careful and utilize everything, because often, and speaking from personal experience, I was asked to speak with someone last year, and within 3 hours of being at the house and everything, I was absolutely convinced, sadly, that this had more in common with mental health than anything of the paranormal spectrum. And therefore, I think certain investigators are far too quick to jump to the paranormal when perhaps all the evidence and the warning signs and the red flags are telling us that there may be something far more normal, as it were, that is the cause of what's going on, or the belief in something. And I think using it certainly doesn't explain everything, but it's certainly a tool to be utilized as and when required, I think.
Sure. I mean, I'm hoping that most investigators that are invited into people's houses would have done the basic investigative research to start with the prelim interview. In that prelim interview that you have with people, it unveils an awful lot when you're in communication with somebody, be it in text messages or be it on the telephone. You can get a good grasp whether this person is in need of help of the paranormal community or a different type of help.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like Mike's just mentioned in the chat there, I'm not suggesting that it's once again, it's not one or the other. I think that there are so many tranches and furrows to this that I think it's getting away, you know, as Paul referred to when he was asking his questions, getting away from some of these cliches and just the straw man arguments or the pushing of a particular narrative based on the investigator's preference for the case rather than the actual, you know, getting to the root cause of things.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, Julie Elizabeth Boyd has got a really interesting comment in what she's posted here. She said, interesting talk, but I do think that it's just all down to teenagers. Oh, sorry, let me put my glasses on. That if it's just all down to teenagers, epilepsy and stress, considering the state of the world right now, then every house would have a poltergeist, if not 10. I get that. I mean, we are in an awful state with the money situation in this country. We're all stressed. None of us are living the affluent life that we used to have, are we? You know, we're all stressed. Health is deteriorating thanks to COVID. Yeah, thanks COVID. That's one of the reasons I went to hospital today after one of the, but it's not about me. Yeah, so I get that. Why are houses, not every single one, having poltergeist activity if that is the case?
Well, as you know, especially depending on the era you grew up in and things, a lot of us grew up in very stressful homes with very
Yeah.
little to go about. And there was nobody on my street had a poltergeist. You know, there would have been 10 a penny in my village growing up, I would suggest, and I would imagine most people, like I say, if you grew up in the, you know, 50s, 60s and 70s, depending on the part of the UK you were in, some people had it really rough, and yet these situations didn't occur. So once again, it's one of those cliches that gets put forward that it's, you know, or it's always working class people or people who have got divorced or single parents and things like that. You see those tropes sometimes pop forward. That's I know it's one of the things that really gets on Evelyn Hollow's nerves. It's when it's always people always dis, well, you know what the working class are like, and and so it is one of those tropes that still hangs around here. That as you mentioned, it's all pubescent teenagers or menopause or things like that. These are the things we need to pull it away from and say, right, let's deal with the actual meat and potatoes here rather than all the flowery presumptions.
Well, my take on working class and poor families being the ones that's always the represented ones. Now, I'm going to tell you my thought process behind that. Being an ex-police officer, the most people that we would see coming before us would also be from the same echelons of society. And that's because most houses, most living areas are on top of each other. So you've got flats in a block of flats, you've got semi-detached or you've got terraced houses. The walls are thin, you can hear what's going through them.
Yeah.
So if you take yourself to people who are not working class society and they're living in detached houses, they don't have that reverberation of noise for the neighbours to call the police. So that's why they don't tend to be, you know, brought up in public. Plus, there's always that thing that says, be seen and not heard when you're upper class. So are these the things that would, you know, make the difference between why it's the working class and poorer class that the police and also paranormal activity hone in on, because they're the ones that people call the police on, or they are recognize what's going on in their home because it's thin walls? That's my thought process on that one. Yeah. I mean, I'm not plastering all over the internet that my house has got a poltergeist, but you know,
I don't know.
well, some people do.
Oh, interesting point though. Yeah, I agree. I see exactly where you're coming from. I mean, well, you will always, and having worked in the rehabilitation of offenders in a previous career as well, it's very, you know, you can kind of see the ingredients that have been sowed long before they've ended up in that particular situation, Caroline, and sometimes it's almost as if it's predestined just based on your postcode, sadly.
Yeah, there's a lot of nature versus nurture. I think that comes into play as well.
Yes.
But that's for a whole different topic and a whole different podcast. So we won't dive too
We'll
deep
get you on the
into that
Unearthly
one.
Bureau.
Yeah, come on the Unearthly. Let's talk about criminal intent. So Julie has also said, has there ever been any now this is another good question. Julie, you need to I love the questions coming in. Has there ever been any research done regarding poltergeist phenomena in prisons and mental hospitals? They are places usually full of anger and stress.
I'm not aware of them, but I would imagine you would suspect someone must have done it. But then again, I suppose it's one of those. One of the things we've got in this country is that we don't really seem to have a lot of old prisons that people can wander around. But I wouldn't know if anybody's had the balls to kind of say to an open prison or something, can we investigate if there is some kind of situation going on here? Because as well, you would suggest that the maximum security prisons or the ones that dealt with more specific challenged prisoners in regards to their mental health, such as Broadmoor and the like, would they not be prime locations for strange things, you would think, because of the nature of the people that were held there? I mean, that's a fascinating idea. I don't think so. I mean, I'm not aware of it, but I will happily accept anything if anybody knows anything different. But I've certainly not come across anything.
Can I come in there,
thinking
please?
Sorry,
Hello?
Rob.
It's me. Sorry.
Yeah, Rob, go for it.
Having been responsible for planning mental health services during my career, what you've got to bear in mind is that these days there aren't any of the big bins that there used to be, the large institutions, because back in the early 80s, the care in the community programs came out, which led to pretty well all of the large, I call them bins because that's what we call them, being closed over the years. So whereas you would historically get a lot of mental handicap and mental illness hospitals stuck out in the middle of nowhere with about 1,400 beds or what have you, they don't exist anymore. Because most of them have been, you're probably fine. I mean, I'm not talking about the secure places like Broadmoor. I mean, I think there's about 4 in the country, if my memory serves me right. And they would be cases on their own. But I appreciate what's being suggested there, but unfortunately, they aren't there anymore to go and knock on the door and say, have you got any poltergeists or anything like that? And can I say, first of all, hi, Paul, it's nice to see what you actually look like after all these podcasts.
Yes, indeed, Rob. Yes, lovely to hear you, my friend.
And yeah. So, I just think that we talk about collecting data, and I put a point further down. The problem with evidence and data, which I entirely agree with, I'm a statistician, I salivate at this, but to get proper patterns and what have you, you've got to have consistent data which is comprehensive and correct. And if you've got, we'd all have possibly done the lottery this week or whenever, Euro Millions or what have you, and let's say there's 50 numbers and and there are 50 factors that you might be talking about on any particular poltergeist or paranormal case. You mentioned a lot tonight, which, all of them are relevant. But if you therefore started to try and, we've got to have that, and there's 50 items we've got to have, well, people aren't going to be able to collect them. And then you've got to categorize them and maybe count them. And so on. And it could be that only a combination like winning the lottery, only 6 working together come out, and the chances of them coming together in one place is 14 million to 1. And which is why whilst I like to collect data, it's a lot softer than I think some people would like, because I'm too old. Sorry, I've rabbited on there.
Say no.
No, you make a valid point, actually. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, I
Right.
remember them all growing up, Rob. You know, everyone where I grew up, we had one in Wakefield, one in Sheffield, one in Barnsley. They all closed in the late 80s, early 90s. So it's yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've closed a lot of them myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was part of my
Yeah.
remit, and put them into better places because they weren't good for people's mental health.
Yeah, they were just
If I
dumping
can
ground,
put it as
sadly.
bluntly
Yeah.
as that, the worst place you would put some people was in a mental health hospital.
Yeah,
You
very true.
know, yeah, I'm quite strong opinion on that. But yeah, hopefully, Paul, we'll have another rendezvous, possibly.
Yes. Would
in the
you
autumn.
one? It's usually every 18 months, isn't it, my friend? So yes,
Yeah,
we'll
something
no
like
doubt
that.
come
I've got a
together.
book coming out in October, so maybe about that.
Absolutely. I shall await your email with bated breath, my friend.
So,
Thank you,
Paul,
Rob.
Oh, sorry, I've got to ask you, what's that pub in Chester that you said was haunted by your auntie?
I always forget the name of it, so I'll find out and I'll email it you. I've got to speak to my mum later, so I'll always ask her because I always think it's called the Golden Lion and it isn't.
Right.
Because
Okay.
it was about 40 years ago.
Yeah, I'm in Chester on Saturday, so
I'll find out with you before midnight, Rob, and I'll ping you an email.
that's great. Thanks very much. Right, I'll shut up now, gang.
Thanks, Rob.
Always a pleasure.
I guess as we're coming up to 9 o'clock now. So, Paul, I mean, so are you at Parameet as well this week? Because I guess you were there the last time.
Yes, I'm not there because as I was mentioning, the reason I'm ringing my mum is she's going to Canada on Saturday, so I'm house sitting for her and her dogs for the next 3 weeks. So I'm not there, sadly.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Very sad. We'll miss you.
Yes, well, I was looking forward to it because I do enjoy it, and it was lovely. Well, lovely to meet you both last year when you were there.
Yes, absolutely.
And you. Yep.
So, Paul, I know that you are involved with two distinctly different podcasts that have a cross reference. Do you just want to give them a pop while we're here so we can direct people accordingly?
Yes, absolutely. So my show is Mysteries and Monsters, which, as you may gather, is a Fortean conversation style show. It's been going over 8 years now. Just hit episode 408. And you can find Mysteries and Monsters on all podcast sites, looking wherever you wish and on most social media platforms. And my other show is I am the co-host of an Anglo-Canadian ghost story where we get listeners to send in stories, or we do a themed episode in regards to that with my erstwhile friend and co-host, Mr. Brennan Stoll. And that's a bit more of a sort of, well, not necessarily light-hearted, but it's a bit different when you're sort of, you're not on a unicycle as I am on Mysteries and Monsters, and I'm in tandem, so it's good to do. So yes, that's more sort of ghost based, whereas my show kind of covers everything under the Fortean umbrella.
Yeah, we have a slight challenge with the ASSAP webinars. In fact, is that we're not big enough to be kind of, because we don't do the whole, this is a clickbait episode title, and we got a big guy in the front with his face like this with a shock factor. It's kind of steered more towards education. As such, it doesn't hit the main kind of track. It kind of sticks within only its kind of circle of community with those who are interested in the serious side of the paranormal. Very weird. On Spotify, it does very well. On YouTube, it does not as good as it should do. But I guess that is just the nature of where we are and what we're doing.
Absolutely.
But it is very interesting in the same way. And I guess because we're also not kind of going down the bombastic route of a particular conversation, we kind of keep the thing grounded. It is, in many ways, it does us a bit of a disservice. But what Caroline and I have certainly noticed is that all the other podcasts, generally speaking, will watch ours and then go and make their own episode based on what we talked about 2 weeks later. It's very noticed. They'll go, that's the topic they're talking about. They're serious about it. Let me do my own version.
I can assure you I won't be doing that.
No, it's good fun, though.
Absolutely. It was a real pleasure and an honour to be asked and invited. And so I just want to say to both yourself and Caroline, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Much appreciated.
And
if we can
thank you for welcoming me into your bosom. It was a pleasure, and nice to have some challenging questions and points raised.
Cool. So,
Wonderful.
Caroline, you are the lady who is in charge of our calendar. Who do we have next week?
No one. Thanks
It
for
could-
asking.
Because it could be me.
Yeah, it might be you. The talk that I've got that I'm giving away this weekend, obviously, I don't want it recorded. So if we have to go with the talk that I'm giving, it will be only people attending and it won't be going out there because it's going to be an article for a magazine as well. So I don't really want to use it.
Because originally it was going to be Dave Holdridge, wasn't it? And he was
Yes, it was.
covering
Yeah.
stone throwing, poltergeisty kind of stuff. Was what is that word? The word I can't remember what it's called. Your article was
don't know.
about.
Unless
What's your
Paul's got another talk he wants to do tomorrow next week. Have you got a spare one knocking around, Paul?
No, I can fill in. Don't you worry.
Okay, perfect. So
I was
next
gonna
week,
say-
everybody, we have Christian with us giving us
Okay.
a talk.
So here's the thing. So the talk I'm going to give next week currently is called Chronological Confusion, and it was something I was working on in the background, and it was originally going to cover 4 items of 4 different types. So they are items that have been found that exist outside of when they are supposed to have been made. So it's a bit more 14, a bit more Earth mystery stuff. So it is uniquely different. However, the first section about machines that were found out of time, actually I managed to get 19 examples. I only originally wanted 4. So it is likely I'm going to break this into 2 different talks. The first one next week being that particular section, the machines that shouldn't exist in the time that they were found. So that's going to be the first one. And then I will do vessels found from the past as perhaps a second one a little bit later down the line, just because I'm not going to get around to getting into it with going to Parameet this week and doing all the research projects that got going on and jump hunting. So I will focus on the first section next week. So it might be a bit shorter of a talk, so we'll have more of a chat afterwards.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Okie dokie.
So everyone here at the webinar, thank you ever so much again for joining us for another wonderful Thursday evening. I learned so much from Paul's talk, even the second time round. The bits that I'd missed the first time all kind of have now completely sunk in. So I'm so grateful. Sorry if you haven't got to ask your question. If there's anything burning, please send them in an email to me and I'll forward them on to Paul and he can message you direct if that's okay. And just remember, everybody, don't have nightmares.
Thank you again, everybody. It's been lovely.
All right, take care, everyone.
you.
Make sure you guys have a good night. And Caroline, I'll see you perhaps tomorrow if you are going to make that long journey up to Hinckley.
Yep. It'll either be the bar or in the spa. One of the two.
Hey, whichever works. Whichever works. Hey, you know, I've managed to get the same room I got last time with the
Have
jacuzzi.
you?
Yeah,
We need to film in your room. We'll put the cameras in there to film. It's a nice room with a backdrop.
I'll do. It's going to be great. All right, dude.
Yeah.
I shall see you then. Take care. I shall see you tomorrow. Take care, everyone.
Good night, everybody.